Welcome in, folks. Get settled. We'll start in just a couple minutes here. As you settle in, please enjoy Posted Sonata by Glenn Horiuchi. Glenn Horiuchi lived in San Diego in the 1980s and helped to organize the testifiers for the commission hearings in Los Angeles, which you'll hear about today. Although Glenn passed away in 2000, his music remains, and we thank his family for the permission to play his work today. All right, it looks like our numbers are settling down a bit, so we'll get started in just a moment here. And again, this is Glenn Horiuchi and Poston Sonata. Okay, let's pause that and we'll get started here. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Samantha Alberts. I am the Interim Director of Education and Public Programs with the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego. To begin our program, we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. The Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego acknowledges this legacy of balance and harmony, and we extend our gratitude and respect to the Indigenous peoples for their past and continued care and stewardship. Thank you. A couple of things before we begin. I want to make mention of the California Humanities, which is a partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. This program is possible through support from them, and we thank them so much for making this possible today. I'm going to drop some links in later on in the program for you to check out what's going on with Cal Humanities. And as we begin here, I want to make a couple announcements about what you can do in this webinar. We're going to be presenting, we'll be taking turns with the panelists that you see here today. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. It's got an icon that looks like the one you can see here. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you want to say something like hello or make a comment or make a connection, please do so in the chat. We don't want to lose any of your questions. So please, if it's a question, use the Q&A function. And if it's just a comment or a connection or saying hello, please use the chat. We are recording. You probably had that announcement as you came into the room. We will be making the video available with captions on our YouTube channel when it's ready, hopefully in the next week or so. After the program, after we've heard from our panelists today, we're going to have a separate meeting so we can see each other face to face for some reflection and some conversation. So please do join us for that. I'll be sharing the link for that at the end. If you do need to leave, as I mentioned, our program is going to be recorded. So please check it out if you get a chance and share it with your friends as well. So without further ado here, I'm going to pass it off to our first speaker, and that is Kei Ochi.
Thank you, Samantha. And good afternoon. On behalf of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego, welcome to the 2022 Day of Remembrance program. This year marks the 80th anniversary of President Franklin Roosevelt's signing of Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. This order authorized the military to remove and incarcerate all Japanese Americans from the West Coast and parts of Hawaii. Upwards of 120,000 men, women, and children, the disabled, the orphaned, the infirmed, all were rounded up like cattle and herded to 10 American concentration camps. San Diego's Japanese Americans first went to the stables at Santa Anita Racetrack, and months later, after the different camps were built, to the desert outposts of Arizona for the duration of World War II. I am Kei Ochi, president of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego, and I'm a Sansei, a third generation Japanese American. My mother and father, Ichie and Akiji Ochi of Chula Vista, were forced to leave San Diego in 1942, along with the almost 2,000 San Diego JAs, and they were incarcerated at Poston, Arizona, Camp 3 for 3 years, all by order of EO 9066. 2 months earlier, I'm sure you know, Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor with 2,400 military personnel and civilians killed as a result of that attack, and the US entered World War II. The entire West Coast appeared to be vulnerable to further attacks by Japan, so the suspicions and fears about Japanese and Japanese Americans added to the existing decades of racial hostility. It grew much worse. The FBI quickly joined law enforcement, local law enforcement, to pick up and incarcerate the leaders of the Japanese American community right after the attack of Pearl Harbor. Locally, here in San Diego, Grace Suita's father, among many others, was picked up and taken away right after the bombing. The family had no idea where he was taken or what would happen to him. And through their own investigation, by traveling into downtown to the different jails, they learned that he was taken to Tuna Canyon, a detention center just north of downtown Los Angeles, and imprisoned behind barbed wire. After that, he was sent to Santa Fe, New Mexico, an INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service internment camp, and then to Santa Anita Racetrack to join the family. Almost all of the Issei, the first generation elders, who were the leaders of our community, were abducted and shipped off to far INS camps, which are not shown on this particular graphic, but they were treated horribly. They were treated essentially as prisoners of war. And going back, why? Why issue Executive Order 9066? Well, the American public was told that, number one, it was for our own safety. But, the main reason that was shared was that it was military necessity, as if we would be a danger, that we would commit espionage or sabotage. Well, we now know that President Roosevelt was very pressured to show strong action that would divert the American public's attention away from the major losses in the Pacific War. So with that diversion, he also ignored his own military intelligence agencies, who said that basically the Japanese on the West Coast were not a problem. This is clearly reported. But he had other major forces, kind of influencing him at the time. And they were the agricultural interests and unions in San Diego who wanted the Japanese out of the state so they could take over the farms and businesses and the land. They could take control of the very, very lucrative agro business, which Japanese and Japanese Americans had struggled for decades to enrich the land, develop the farms, and build a powerful business. The American Legions and other groups such as the Sons and Daughters of the American West, and even unions, the unionists, all wanted to remove all of the Japanese Americans. So racism was combined with economic greed, two hugely powerful forces, and they worked together against Japanese American community. So EO 9066 enabled the military to remove the Japanese Americans from the West Coast and incarcerate them inland. They had no charges, issued, no trial, no due process of law. Their civil and constitutional rights were just thrown into a trash bin because of their ancestry and because of political expediency. The immigrant Issei were called aliens, which we've all heard of, but their children, who were US citizens, were labeled non-aliens. Okay, we weren't called citizens, not Japanese Americans, we were now labeled non-aliens. This strategy of euphemisms, which is a subject for another program, I'm sure, worked well. It was part of a very concerted strategy so that the US citizenry, the public, would not really protest too much about what was happening to US citizens. Well, today's Day of Remembrance is part of many, many commemorations taking place right now in Japanese American communities and on college campuses throughout the country. You are joining in with many hundreds of folks at various DORs. I know for a fact that right now in Los Angeles' Little Tokyo, they're having their Day of Remembrance. Over this entire weekend, Gardena Japanese Community Institute is having their events. And even on, I believe, Friday night, UC Riverside sponsored their DOR. And another very, very large commemoration is being hosted by the National Park Services. It's for the entire weekend. And the really amazing news that we heard just today is that President Joseph Biden Jr. has officially declared today, February 19th, a day of remembrance of Japanese American incarceration during World War II. So even on a national level, this Day of Remembrance is being recognized. So today, we not just think about the terrible damages done to our community, but we also want to take time to honor and remember our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, for despite terrible suffering and hardship, they were courageous, they persevered, they worked hard to resettle after the war. And they created the lives that we, as particularly Sansei and Yonsei and Gosei, have today. We indeed stand on the shoulders of the Issei and Nisei generations and even the generations before them. And we are all so very grateful for all that they have provided for us. Stepping back just a second, like so many Japanese Americans, my parents did not talk about camp at all to us while we were growing up. We really had no idea what they went through. My sister and I were talking that maybe it was 6th grade camp. It must be, something like that. It was just so little that we knew. But as an adult, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to learn a lot about what they went through and what the entire community went through. And it's rather become a mission for my entire life, at least the last 40 years, to share the stories and the true history of our community and what our government had put them through. So Day of Remembrance is a time to remember, to learn, to understand the heroism of the Issei and Nisei, and now our remaining Nisei are in their 90s. And so whether we like it or not, we Sansei have become the elders. And I hope that, we can work as hard as they, as a generation, to carry on their legacy and all that they have built for us. And today it's important to acknowledge those in our community who work so hard to continue to rebuild our communities. And even in the last decades to where we are now. So now I take a short break to share the screen with the 2 Sansei board members of the Japanese American Historical Society, Gary Himaka and Luann Lee. Gary has also served in the community as the post commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Asian Post 4851, and Luann is also the president of the Buddhist Temple of San Diego. And so I now share the screen with Luann and Gary.
Thank you, Kay, and welcome to everyone and taking time out to attend today. This portion of the Day of Remembrance is entitled In Memoriam. Today we remember and honor our Issei and Nisei generations. The Issei, as immigrants, journeyed far to come to the US for opportunity, and they faced tremendous hostility. Their Nisei children were raised to be good Americans. During and after the war, they suffered tremendous hardship, the losses of businesses, farms, and homes, of family separations, of loss of dignity, and loss of freedom. So we remember them, and we thank them all for their strength, perseverance, and sacrifices. We are indebted to them.
Thank you, Kay, for introducing us. For this In Memoriam, we share the photos of 11 San Diego community trends who passed away within the past several years and who contributed to organizations and causes that enriched us all. We apologize for the omissions we may have made.
Bruce Asakawa, 1941 to 2022. Born and raised in San Diego, Bruce became one of San Diego's premier gardening experts, alongside his wife Sharon. Working with his father Moto at Presidio Nursery, he offered landscape and garden design services, which was innovation at the time. Bruce was a longtime supporter of the JA community.
Elaine Kimie Hebe Bowers, 1931 to 2021. Elaine, a second generation San Diegan, was among JAHSSD's founding members and served as its first board president. A retired postal employee, who was also a gifted and popular pianist and organist.
Yale Mio Hill, 1947 to 2021. Mio loved her family, music, sports, movies, and traveling to exotic destinations with her husband, Ed. She gave countless hours of her time to benefit others and directed the script fundraising program at the Buddhist Temple of San Diego for many years.
Jeannie Inoue, 1950 to 2021. Jeannie, born in Watsonville, was the youngest in an El Cajon farming family. She served as Buddhist Temple of San Diego secretary and retired last year from Union Bank. Her loving family includes Craig, 2 sons and daughters-in-law, and 2 grandkids.
Toru Paul Po Kaneyuki, 1929 to 2021. As a Point Loma youth and classmate of baseball legend Don Larson, Po also excelled in sports in both high school and college. World War II incarceration cut short any dreams of sports as a profession. Po was a longtime JAHSSD member and volunteer.
Yuki Kawamoto, 1924 to 2020. Yuki Kawamoto was born and raised in San Diego. He was an active board member of the San Diego Buddhist Temple, as well as a founding member of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego board. Yuki served on the board in many capacities, but notably as one of the speakers on the Speakers Bureau who shared his interment story with so many San Diegans.
Larry Shimamoto, 1926 to 2021. Served the Imperial Valley community as the JACL chapter president for many years. He built a replica of a camp barrack for the Imperial Valley History Center, and for his 26 years of volunteer work for the Imperial High School boosters, the school stadium was named Shimamoto Simpson Stadium.
Masayoshi Masuda, 1919 to 2021. Mas served in the historic 142nd Regimental Combat Team during World War II. Before and after the war, he was a commercial fisherman traveling as far as Ecuador and Peru. Longtime member of the JAHSSD, Mas and his wife Grace were part of the Lunch Bunch that did mail-outs for the JAHSSD.
Frank Wada, 1921 to 2021. Frank served in the 442 RCT during World War II, earning the Bronze Star, Purple Star, and Combat Infantryman badge. He settled in San Diego and worked for the Postal Service and the Navy Public Works as a mechanical planner. Frank built a life-size replica of a camp barrack that has been used in many exhibits.
Joe Yamada and Elizabeth Kikuchi Yamada, 1930-2020. Born and raised in San Diego, both Elizabeth and Joe Yamada were pillars of the Japanese American community. Joe was a prominent San Diego landscape architect, and his works can be found all over the city. Liz was active as a board member of many San Diego institutions and generously shared her letters written in camp that resulted in the book, Letters to Miss Breed. Both were supporters of the JA community and helped pave the way for many in the community.
And as part of this in memoriam, the Japanese Historical Society of San Diego would also like to acknowledge and pay respect to the 5,000 people in San Diego who have lost their lives in the current COVID pandemic, and the almost 5,725,000 deaths worldwide.
May I also pay respect to the end of an era for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Asian Pacific Post 4851. After almost 55 years in the community, we've had to close our doors at the end of 2021. For all of our community losses, please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you.
So thank you to Luann and Gary. Many of you know that in the 1980s and 1990s, the Japanese American community fought for redress and reparations. And this was to really our right to redress grievances as provided in the US Constitution for the violation of our community's constitutional and civil rights. And through the coming together of many, many important factors and forces, after about an 8-year concerted campaign, the community succeeded. It was amazing. The Civil Liberties Act of 1988 provided a presidential apology and token reparations to each surviving former incarceree. And after 10 years, by 1998, over 82,500 people received the government's apology and reparations. And you know, Japanese Americans comprised a very small percent of the US population. So how did we succeed? Well, of course, there are many factors, and some books have been written on this topic. But one of the most important reasons is that we had the support of other communities, from the Latinx and Black communities to churches, such as the National Lutheran Synod, from the national teachers organizations, and more. And then another huge factor was the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians, CWRIC. And thanks to then Nikkei Congress members Bob Matsui, Norman Mineta, Daniel Inoue, and Spark Matsunaga, and the efforts of the Japanese American Citizens League, in 1980, an act of Congress created this commission to review the circumstances of EO 9066 and the impact on citizens and resident aliens, and then to make recommendations for appropriate remedies. The government's commission traveled to 10 cities and heard the testimonies of 789 primarily Japanese Americans who had survived the wartime removal and or incarceration. In Los Angeles, the commission heard the testimonies of 157 people on August 4th, 5th, and 6th of 1981. The final report that they issued is powerful. Its main conclusion, which I have shared before with other audiences, is that Executive Order 9066 was not justified by military necessity, but the broad historical causes were race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. It continued, quote, widespread ignorance about Americans of Japanese descent contributed to a policy conceived in haste and executed in an atmosphere of fear and anger at Japan. A grave personal injustice was done to the American citizens and resident aliens of Japanese ancestry, unquote. The research and conclusions of the commission were compiled into the final report entitled Personal Justice Denied. This report was critical to the passage of the Civil Liberties Act. And the photo that you see here is wonderful. It's from the Los Angeles CWRIC hearings. And the great part is that in this particular picture, seated at the large table, are San Diego testifiers. They're facing the commissioners, and on the left end of the table with glasses is Mas Hironaka, and moving right is Beth Shiranaka. Next to her is Jan Tokumaro. We have other community people. And then at the end of that table is Akira Horiyuchi, all San Diegans. Very significantly, two Los Angeles organizations got together, Visual Communications and NCRR, the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, and filmed all of Los Angeles testimonies. And although you can get written transcripts of the 789 testimonies from across the nation through the National Archives, very few cities filmed the proceedings. And so what you're about to see next, I think it's our community treasure. I've often called it a real gold mine of our history because these are testimonies of people who actually suffered through the incarceration. And although most of them have passed on, we have in the past decade and will into the future share these stories to tell the real stories of what happened as a result of EO 9066. And after almost 40 years after the beginning of the war, this was 1981, these testifiers were encouraged and helped to tell their stories. It was very, very difficult for them. And as you'll see, their stories they weave a very powerful story, a record, a history. And it's something that I think that will inform the American public, I hope, for generations to come. And so now we'll switch over to a 14-minute video excerpt from the Los Angeles Commission hearings.
It's unembellished, it's straightforward, and it's a devastating indictment of our government and of our society.
When the photographs of camp were shown at the Pasadena Art Museum some years ago, I burst into tears and could not stop the tears from flowing. All the pent-up emotion held back for so many years was released. The numbness of the evacuation was finally lifted, and because of the humiliation and shame, I could never tell my 4 children my true feelings about that event in 1942. I did not want my children to feel the burden of shame and feeling of rejection by their fellow Americans.
I feel that this hearing has been long overdue, for I equate the evacuation with rape. A rape victim finds it very difficult to talk about it and suffers from shock. And I think that we have been through that period where it has been difficult to talk about.
I've never been able to talk about this. More people have come up to me and said I must speak up. My children, even my own children, don't know that my brother was shot in the back.
When on December 7, 1941, 11 p.m., the FBI entered our home and arrested him and gave no reason. I asked him, "When will he return?" The FBI agent replied, "You may never see him again."
In 48 hours, we were told to pack up and leave from the place we called home for at least 50 years or more.
2 guys walk in my house, and they came to my bedroom, and they say, hey, buddy, wake up. I wake up, and I ask them, "What the hell you guys are?" Then they flash FBI. He say, FBI. So I thought, what the hell did I do? You're alien, enemy, alien. On the train, first time I had a steak. So you know what some of these old men said? The old man said, hey, they feeding us because we're going to die. So I thought, no, this country ain't going to do that kind of stuff, man. You know, it's a democratic country, Bill right, constitutional, and all that. Just go with it, see? So they're not going to do that. This is democracy. You know what one woman say? No, this is not democracy. This is democracy, he said.
Then we reached the place where we see nothing but the snow. We call the Bismarck, North Dakota. Now, I found out the weather was 30 below zero. 30 below zero. Now I had to walk through the snow with my barefoot and slippers. On the third day, I had a frostbite on my feet. I couldn't go. So that I asked my friends to bring food to my camp.
When we got to Santa Anita, we were assigned housing in the stables. Where one horse was housed, we were 3 families.
Not see my father again until the middle of 1946. This inhumane, cruel treatment and happening took place in the good old United States and not in Gestapo Germany. Hard to believe, isn't it?
On August 27, 1941, at 2 a.m., we were informed that our baby had passed away.
At the time of my birth, my mother's physician in camp performed a tubal ligation on her. She never gave her consent.
After 28 hours of labor, the nurse became concerned and sent for the doctor. The doctor examined me and said, "Your baby's heartbeat is getting very faint. I will have to use forceps to deliver the baby, and I will have to give you a local painkiller because we do not have an anesthesiologist. We can't wait any longer because we do not have a resuscitating machine to revive the baby." I remember many details in the delivery room. After using the scalpel to cut me, he picked up the forceps. After much pulling, he finally got the baby out. When I saw her, after 3 days, I noticed a large scab on the back of her head. She has a bald spot there to this day. Madeline is a developmentally disabled person. She is mentally retarded and has grand mal epilepsy.
Are you willing to serve for the United States in case of an enemy invaded us? And it said yes or no. And another one like, are you willing to be loyal to the United States? And yes or no, and etc. I wrote no all the way through with my anger and disgust and frustration. The brutal action taken against us loyal citizens. My blood was burning with agony and frustration. I was so disgusted that I requested for deportation to Japan, a country I had never seen before. Then I was sent to Tula Lake.
You may wish to simply read the English translation, and that may save a little stress and time.
They worked very hard to prepare this testimony, and I appreciate if you would let them speak in Japanese. Thank you.
The problem we have here is one of time.
But these Japanese-speaking individuals being told to shut up most of their life.
It's not being suggested we're trying to shut anybody up.
Can I have just Japanese without the translation? They can turn in their written English translation.
Whatever their pleasure is would be fine with the commission.
日本語でいいですか。はい。投げ込んでちょうど豚と同じようにされました。それで量も足りません。これで生きていかれるかねと全て覆されてしまいました。家族の生活、安定、土台、覆されてしまいました。一家の柱ともする主人と頼りにしていた長女も亡くなってしまいました。私は本当に苦労が多かったのですが、私たちの本当の苦労と経験とに対するアメリカ政府は償わなきゃならないと思います。
We were the only Japanese American family in Kodiak, Alaska. In a short time, my father and 2 uncles were arrested and put in concentration camps. I am very bitter about this. I have not seen my father since I was 11 years old. I am now 51 years old. I have missed my father very much, and I wonder I wonder if he's alive today.
We are Peruvian citizens. We are not even in the United States at the time. Now, I understand that, in fact, 5,000 Japanese Peruvians were exchanged for American prisoners of war. Now, in this process, in this transportation process, the baby died. So we stayed in Crystal City until summer of 1947. I remember as a child when I used to say, when we used to say, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. I never felt comfortable about saying it. I couldn't understand why. I think today now I understand why it was that I could not say those words comfortably.
The pain, trauma, and stress of the incarceration experience was so overwhelming. We used the psychological defense mechanisms of repression, denial, and rationalization to keep us from facing the truth. The truth was that the government we trusted, the country we loved, the nation to which we had pledged loyalty, had betrayed us, had turned against us. Our natural human feelings of rage, fear, and helplessness were turned inward and buried. Our scars are permanent and deep.
One significant consequence was the effectively silencing of an entire Japanese American community to become the Gomen Nasai people, those who tread lightly as if unwelcome.
As one student stated in her term paper, the shame and humiliation that my parents suffered were passed on to me. And although I never saw barbed wire, tasted mess hall food, or lived in cramped barracks, my mind is still imprisoned from that experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Listen,
I'm sorry.
if we have outbursts like this, we're going to ask people to be removed.
We know how some people are.
Now, wait a second.
I-
There are some.
What are the economic losses? The $6 to $8 billion, although it sounds astonishing, is a minimal figure because we are dealing only with what the government allowed in 1948, okay, which, as you know, was virtually nothing. It was nothing for psychological damages, physical damages, anything that could be connected with the evacuation, wrongful death, wrongful incarceration.
Frustration and anger still in my blood. I now demand a monetary compensation of $1 million from the United States government. For ruining my life, career, and injury inflicted upon me and my family. I also demand a monetary compensation of $500,000 each to my 5 children.
I am speaking on behalf of los Frente a los Pueblos Unidos. We're an organization based in the San Fernando Valley fighting for the rights of Latino peoples. And I would like to put it on record right now that we in the Frente believe that the Latino people will stand behind the Japanese people for reparations.
Important that we even take that small attempt to heal the deep wounds that were unjustly inflicted upon Japanese American citizens of this city. For no matter how painful, no matter how shameful it is for us to admit that this city caused fellow Americans untold harm and suffering, we must make these apologies and acknowledge the wrongs that have been committed.
It is an opportunity for us to continue to learn and to sum up this collective experience and to channel the anger and pain into a fighting spirit that demands reparations.
Thank you.
And most importantly, we strongly call for direct monetary compensation to each victim of the concentration camps. This is a historic and significant event. Any compromised recommendation will be a compromise of justice. Thank you.
They talk about being let out of camp in 45, 44, 43. I don't think we ever did get out of camp. I think we're beginning to get out of camp now.
I am taking a very deep breath. Please take a moment and acknowledge your own reactions to these testimonies. And I would greatly appreciate it if you would really seriously take the time just to let it sink in a moment. I do share that in August of 1981, I attended one whole day of the Los Angeles hearings. I didn't know anyone in the auditorium. I went by myself. I had heard about this event and was kind of curious. I decided to go. And the speaker's stories changed my life. It was a history that I had no idea about. And I was angry. I was emotional. I was so upset that all this had happened and had been kept from me. I joined NCRR, the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, on that same day. And I have worked with them on the redress campaign in the 80s and 90s, on continuing education about the camps to schools and colleges and conferences. And we've also worked in support of other communities who have been similarly targeted. We feel that's very, very important. But I do have to say, each time I see the video, I still get emotional. When I see Lillian Baker attack 442 veteran Jim Kawamanami and try to tear away his testimony, I get furious. And I'm reminded, it's that part of the film is important to remind us about the kinds of hostility and anger and racism that was out there then and actually is sadly still out there today. And to help us further process, think about what we've just seen, I've asked Christy Lin to share her thoughts. Christy is a Yonsei, a fourth generation Japanese American, as well as a third generation Chinese American. From an early age, she's been involved in the Japanese American community of San Diego through her church, Pioneer Ocean View United Church of Christ, and volunteering with the Historical Society. Christy is a licensed landscape architect and also an artist. Currently, you can view her art installation in the windows of the New Village Arts Theater in Carlsbad in conjunction with their current production, Desert Rock Garden. It's a play about the World War II Japanese American incarceration, and we hope that you'll all support that. Through her artwork, Christy explores her mixed heritage and her cultural identity. So welcome, Christy, and thanks for being here with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy Lin, and as Kay said before, I'm here to share a few reflections on what we just saw. So I watched this video for the first time a few weeks ago with my parents, and after the video ended, we were silent, so moved by the outpouring of emotion and vivid accounts of trauma in the testimonies. My heart really felt for the woman whose baby suffered permanent brain damage from lack of medical care in the hospitals. And my mom said that the elderly woman who spoke only in Japanese and lost both her husband and daughter in camp looked exactly like my mom's grandmother. So, having never met my great-grandmother, the video made me realize that I had never met an Issei, let alone heard them speak about the hardships that they endured. Her story was heart-wrenching, and it really led me to speculate on what it was like for my own great-grandmother, who immigrated from Japan to Berkeley, California, had 7 sons, had her whole family imprisoned in Topaz, Utah, had her husband suffer a back injury while unloading supplies in the camp, making him unable to work again, and had her boys drafted into the army for the government that was imprisoning them. So now that my grandparents have passed away, we've been cleaning up their house. Or maybe some of you can relate. The other day, we found my grandpa's draft card and his military occupational specialties, which were listed as rifleman, assistant rocket gunner, and finance clerk. It's really impossible for me to imagine my sweet, easygoing grandpa ever picking up a gun. So how did he feel about his position? I'll never know. And I'm not a psychologist, but I really feel for my grandparents and my whole Japanese American community when I watch this. The trauma and hardships spoken about by those who testified in the video were not just unique to just these testifiers. I know that these experiences were shared by many, however, many choose not to talk about it, and we should respect that also. I want to end by bringing it to present day. In the video, when I saw the white lady attack our elderly 442nd veteran, I couldn't help but think about the attacks on Asian Americans today. This pandemic has been doubly hard on our community because we've been wrongfully blamed for bringing the coronavirus. One day I went stand-up paddleboarding in Point Loma, and a man on a boat started yelling at me, "You Chinese," and waving this big Trump 2020 flag at me. And I paddled away before I could exactly make out what he was saying, but it wasn't nice. And then my sister was at a hotel and someone there told her to take her virus to another table. So we're also coming up on this 1-year anniversary of the spa shooting in Atlanta, which brought up so much for many of us. And the organization Stop AAPI Hate received 10,370 reports from Asian American and Pacific Islanders of hate incidents that they experienced from March 2020 to September 2021. And you and I know for a fact that just like in World War II, our community is very hesitant to report these things and speak out. So the number is probably way higher. So we've got both these stories from the incarceration camps during World War II and these stories from today of racism and incredible heaviness. Now, what do we do with all of this? How do I hear all of this and not want to just become numb, turn away and avoid the topic altogether? And when I start to allow myself to feel emotional, how do I reconcile the stories of people saying that camp wasn't so bad with the stories of people saying that camp brought multi-generational trauma? So as an artist, I've learned that when I'm faced with a big project, I need to break it down into tiny pieces that feel deeply personal to me. So maybe instead of trying to process this whole day of remembrance, it was like overwhelming amount of stuff that happened, Maybe I'll open up some of those dusty boxes with my grandparents' belongings. Or maybe I'll serve food tonight on our imari dish, or rice in the old lacquer rice container from my great-grandmother. On this day of remembrance, I just want us to not only remember the past, but also that we're here for each other. And the signing of Executive Order 9066 profoundly impacted our entire community to this day. And so as we remember the past, I want us to remind us that we're in this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. I just saw part of Nancy's chat. You are amazing, such an asset to our community. Thank you for sharing your personal reflections with us. And I think you have encouraged others to do likewise. And also I want to thank you for drawing the comparison or the connections to today, because the entire topic of anti-Asian violence that has happened to us for the past couple of years, we're not really taking the time today to address, but hopefully in perhaps the next seminar, we can talk more about that, because like you, I've made a report to the API hate for an aggression against me too. I think a lot of us, don't feel, or we've not been able to share those amongst one another. So again, I thank you, and you did a wonderful job. Thank you, Christy. Going back slightly to those testimonies, I wanted to just share that they are, all of them, all 157 from Los Angeles, are available to you, available to the public on the website of vcmedia.org/speakout. You can see the entire testimony of Jim Kawamanami, or Mabel Ota, the one whose daughter was so hurt during the delivery. You can hear the entire testimony of each person whose name you may have seen on the screen, as well as those of the San Diegans, which we are saving for another seminar. So please, I hope I'll ask Sam to put that in the chat, that it's an overwhelming and yet a wealth of experience, on that site. I'm going to pivot slightly now. As you know, the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego did move to City Heights in April of 2021, last year. And we became residents of District 9 of San Diego City Council. And so today, we are very, very honored to have as our honored guest, our representative, Sean Elo-Rivera. Mr. Elo-Rivera has recently been elected to the position of San Diego City Council's president. So, what a testimony of respect and support his council members gave him. I'd like to share about him that he proudly represents San Diego 9th City Council District and is committed to the realization of his vision of opportunity for all. He was elected as council member in November of 2020, and then elected city council president in December of 2021. Before joining the council, he served as an elected member of the San Diego Community College District Board of Trustees and as the executive director of Youth Will, where he worked to create a future where every young person is happy, healthy, and prepared to reach their potential. He previously spent time leading community organizing, policy, and civic engagement efforts at a local nonprofit. And as a first-generation college student, Mr. Elo-Rivera attended Golden West Community College. He then transferred to and earned his bachelor's degree from Chapman University, where he studied psychology, sociology, and history. He came to San Diego to attend California Western School of Law, where he focused on creative problem solving and earned honors for his pro bono service while earning his Juris Doctor. At Cal Western, he served in multiple leadership roles, including president of La Raza Student Association. Sean continues to be shaped by his early career as a high school athletics coach, as well as years spent volunteering and teaching abroad in South America and Korea. For Mr. Elo-Rivera, family is very important to him. He grew up in a large family of 7 with his parents, a brother, and 3 sisters. His family's diversity and experiences, riding an up and down roller coaster in and out of the middle class, will forever shape the way Sean sees the world and motivates him to make it better. He self-describes as a husband, son, brother, and a committed friend who is fueled by love. He also loves traveling and dining with his wife, Angela, and his early morning trips to the beach with their dog, Lexi. So welcome to Council President Sean Elo-Rivera. Welcome to a day of remembrance, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kay. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share what really is a sacred space with you all. And it's an honor to present the proclamation that I'll be presenting on this very, very important day. I think that who we are is really important. So I will, share that I come here as someone who has a multi-ethnic, multi-religious background, and part of that heritage is my father's Jewish ancestry. And so the story of Japanese internment is one that I certainly hold with great respect and honor, and realize that intergenerational trauma is a real thing that all of us have to sort through, as well as understanding the dangers when any group of people is allowed to be ostracized or dehumanized. So thank you again for being here. As I also just thank you, Kay, for all the work that you're doing for the Japanese American Historical Society to commemorate this day. As we look back in time, it's easy to recognize some of the mistakes and injustices that were committed. 80 years ago, the people leading this country and this region allowed ignorance, hatred, bigotry, and fear to incarcerate 120,000 Japanese Americans and other people of Japanese descent. People thought of this city, thought it was the right thing to do to ask the FBI to send nearly 2,000 San Diegans to internment camps. But due to the efforts of Japanese Americans over the decades since World War II, people now better understand how wrong that was. Through outreach, through speaking out, through telling your stories about how much was lost, you've educated generations of Americans about the incredible injustice that was done. And in the 1980s, the US government officially apologized for these actions. This is not something that the US government usually does. It is a huge testament to the strength, the resiliency, organizing power of the Japanese American community. And you should be so commended for that. I also want to say thank you for educating me about what the San Diego City Council did in 1942. We know that Resolution 76068 said the following: the Council of the City of San Diego hereby respectfully calls the attention of the Federal Bureau of Investigation to the fact that there are in San Diego and vicinity many enemy aliens, especially Japanese, whose continued residence here is considered inimical to the best interests of this vital defense area. It is urged upon said Federal Bureau of Investigation that said enemy aliens be removed from this vicinity, since their presence here is cause for great concern on the part of the City of San Diego due to existence of known subversive elements. I read that line in our city council meeting this past week so that people could hear exactly what the council did many years ago. And as city council president, I have an opportunity and a moral responsibility to act to attempt to correct the record and let everyone know that that was not acceptable. So with that, you have my commitment to try to have my colleagues support me in rescinding Resolution 76068. But today we have to commemorate this day of remembrance. And I am very grateful for the opportunity to bring this proclamation to the City Council. And I will just read the last 2 lines of that proclamation. Whereas we honor those harmed by Executive Order 9066 and their perseverance in struggling to regain livelihoods and homes for their families. We seek to raise public awareness and prevent recurrence of past mistakes in this time of heightened racial animus. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Council of the City of San Diego that this council, for and on behalf of the people of San Diego, is hereby proclaimed February 19th, 2022 to be Day of Remembrance in the City of San Diego. Thank you.
I am so grateful. Thank you so much, Council President Elo-Rivera, for this proclamation, for your leadership in the rescission of the resolution 76068. It gives me chills. It's just a tremendous thing that you're in the position that you're in at this moment to help us with this and to rectify some of the actions of the past. It's been a pleasure to work with you and your office representatives. I hope that this is the very beginning of a lot of collaborations with you and with your staff, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you for being here. I know how very, very busy you are, but you've really, really done a wonderful thing for the community. So thank you again. Also, I'd like to thank everyone who's made this possible today, but of course that's very difficult to do. And certainly in the District 9 office, I work closely with Jeffrey Nguyen, Christopher Chan. Although I've not met Heidi, I've worked with Heidi Palmer and Marian Osman. So it's been a beautiful start to a beautiful relationship. And now circling back to Christy, I have to thank you again, Christy. You just give me hope. The Yonsei generation, I hope they're all like you. I do. You're very, very, compassionate and caring, and taking the time, taking your very, very busy time as a landscape architect and artist to be here with us today. I'm going to also thank California Humanities for helping us here, and for the video, the testimonies video, the Visual Communications Organization and NCRR. Even the support of our community organizations, such as the Buddhist Temple of San Diego and the Pioneer Ocean View United Church of Christ and the Coronado History Association, and others who I have failed to name, for doing outreach and gathering people for this important program today. And as always, I thank our members, our Historical Society members and donors. We would not be here without you, so thank you for that. I know this is not quite protocol, but a huge shout out to the Historical Society's Director of Programs and Education, Samantha Alberts. She introduced or started our program. She's handled all of the Zoom technology, which is a foreign language to me and many Sansei. She's handled the technology and the creative end of today's DOR. So I know normally, we don't do that kind of thing, but I have to. So as we bring today's DOR to a close, I want to just circle back and remind everybody of the theme of the program. It is remembrance, redress, and reparations, but emphasize learning from the past. I'd like to ask you what you think the lessons from our past are. What are they for you? I have definite ideas, but those who know me know that my ideas could fill another hour. But I'd like to invite you to think about it and suggest that we all, number one, continue learning. I think it's the key, learning more about what happened to our community as well as other communities. We certainly didn't know about it while we were growing up. It was not in the textbooks, but because of the Civil Rights Movement, because of the redress movement, because of the Civil Liberties Act and where we are today in 2022, there are volumes and volumes of history books, information, artistic endeavors to tell our story. I hope that DOR gave you a little bit of more insight to the stories of Japanese Americans who experienced the camps and the harsh impacts of EO 9066. And when EO 9066 is mentioned ever again, I think you'll be able to relate to it very well. I encourage you, we will follow up on this Day of Remembrance program with future JAHSSD webinars to pursue those lessons that we've learned. But in my final closing, I really, really would like to just share that the 1981 Commission's final report was absolutely critical to our receiving redress and reparations. And I wanted to share that there's a current bill in Congress, HR 40. This bill is to establish another commission to study the impacts of historic slavery and although it's a very broad topic, deserves our consideration. It deserves our open-mindedness and maybe learning more about the topic. With an HR 40 commission, there's a chance that the true stories of enslaved people and their descendants can be recorded for posterity and for all of us. And down the road, possibly some form of reparation. It's such a very intense, emotional topic that I think that I just hope that everyone will be able to make their own connections to the suffering of our community and connect it even in the slightest way to the suffering of other people of color, in our country. And my very, very final closing thought is this. And although we Japanese Americans, our parents, grandparents suffered terribly as a result of the 09-66, no one stood up for us. There was nobody who had our back. Okay, there were a few friends and neighbors that we had lived with in our communities who did help us out, but there was only one national organization who took up some justice positions. Even the national ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, did not protect our constitutional rights. But that one particular organization were the Quakers, the American Friends. I know that it was not popular to support and defend Japanese Americans back in the day, but they did so. They did so on principle, and they defended our rights as citizens and as human beings. And personally, I thank the Quakers in a very small way. They've been invited to previous Day of Remembrance programs, in Los Angeles to speak and participate. But each month I remember them with a very small donation to American Friends Service Committee for their ongoing justice work all around the world. Let us be the people. Let us be the community that uses our history to step up and support others who have been similarly targeted. Our future programs will share more about our own history, explore ways to preserve it, and also share ways to make connections to other communities, in and around us. And I hope you will join us. If you are able, please stay on and join me in a little after party, a little post-Day Remembrance gathering, but it's on a separate Zoom link that is being posted in the chat by Sam. And what you would have to do is click on that link and then join me and others who can hang out a bit to share your reactions to the program, to the testimonies, to share your own family's experiences, to ask questions. And so with that note, I hope some of you will be able to stay, hang out a bit, decompress, and talk. So thank you again, especially to Council President, Shauna Elo-Rivera, Christy, Gary, Luann, all speakers and participants, and hope to see you at the after party. Stay well. Bye-bye.
I'm going to drop a couple of really important links. The first is that link that Kay was referring to for our after party, as she's calling it. You can click that and it'll take you directly to a meeting in Zoom so we can all see each other rather than this webinar format, a little bit more personal. So please do join us for that in the next few minutes. And I'm also including a link to a survey, and this is part of our, when we receive our funds from Cal Humanities, it's very, very important for us to take stock of how things are going. So I'm including that link as well and a little bit of information. I'm going to send these both, or I'm sorry, I'm going to send the survey link as part of our follow-up email as well. So you don't have to grab it right now, but do please keep it in mind as something to complete. It can be done anonymously and we really appreciate it. I'm going to include the meeting link again, because I think it just got scooched up a little bit. So I'm going to put it back in the chat and I'll hang out here a moment and I'll start the meeting in about 3 minutes so that we can all join each other there. So give you a chance to copy that link or the meeting ID and passcode. And it shouldn't need any sort of authentication. You should just be able to join us. And we would so love to see you there.
Thank you.